We live in an ever-interconnected world, a world where each person is just a text away. When we look at how far we have come, it simply is almost hard to believe that some communities still live totally isolated from the rest of the world. Still, with this wide capability of modern technologies, approximately 100 isolated tribes are left unexplored. Most of these are present in the deepest Amazon rainforests and some far-off islands of New Guinea. Such communities have a way of life from way before the digital age. But what happens when these isolated worlds collide with ours? Well, it has happened, and the results were terrifying. Today I'm going to tell you about 3 total horror stories of run-ins with these uncontacted tribes. These are true and disturbing events that remind us that we should leave these tribes on their own. But before we embark on this journey, you've come to the right place if you're a fan of the weird, creepy, and unexplained. So remember to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Now let's get into the stories. This story is not for the faint-hearted. It is truly one of the most horrifying in the annals of encounters with secluded tribes. It is about the brutal killing of a bishop and a nun by the Guaranis tribe of Ecuador. Bishop Alejandro Lavaca, age 67, and Sister Inés Arango, 50, found themselves in the midst of a brutal cultural clash. Upon contacting the tribe, they were not just brutally killed, but the tribesmen left their bodies in the most horrifying ways to send a message to the outside world. During the 1980s, there was an ongoing war between some oil companies and the Guarani tribe. The forest, once untouched, had become the new frontier for oil companies and settlers. They were invited by the Ecuadorian government to tap into the region's untapped resources. This invasion was not subtle. Bulldozers carved through the heart of the wilderness, and the place echoed of dynamite, all just so they could find a reserve of petroleum. But here's the thing. This forest is not just any forest. It is home to the Guaranis, people living as their ancestors did, in harmony with nature, away from the hustle of our modern world. They live a very different life from most of us. No clothes, no modern medicine, and they get their food by hunting in the forest. This tribe has some traditions that might sound pretty shocking. They believe in keeping their population manageable, so they drown their firstborn daughters. And when the older members cannot keep up with the tribe's nomadic lifestyle, they either stone or burn them alive. Now, these practices made this tribe pretty intimidating to other tribes around them. They were known to not just stand their ground, but also to go on the offensive, even taking women from other groups. When the oil company started their project in a nearby area, the Guaranis started noticing their food, like monkeys, were not around as much because of all the new noise and changes. The Guaranis were not going to sit back and let the new settlers mess with their land like that. In fact, they were called the killers by the people living in the nearby areas. These people were also known as the Red Feet because they used to paint themselves red. The Guaranis started to come out and confront the workers. There were some deadly confrontations between the Guaranis and the new settlers. One night, a cook was just picking yucca plants, but he ended up being killed with a spear. Alejandro, who was a bishop, was deeply troubled by these events. He saw the increasing encroachments by oil companies as a ticking time bomb for more violence. He felt something had to be done. He believed that if he can just talk to them, maybe he can stop the bloodshed. It was a noble thought, but the forest does not care about nobility. On February 11, 1987, Lavaca wrote a letter to the church, trying to show just how much their peaceful forest was being torn apart. He asked for the church's blessing to approach the tribe. Back at his mission, Lavaca gathered his team. They needed a plan to reach out to the Red Feet to try and share their peaceful message before things got even worse. From March to April, Lavaca flew over the forest, scouting. He was looking for the Red Feet, trying to understand where they were and how to approach them. On one of these flights, he spotted a small group of them. He marked the spot and flew back, ready to plan his next steps. Lavaca, who had been around Ecuador for 30 years, had some pull. He managed to get his contract with the oil company extended. They were supposed to help him reach these isolated tribes, but going back to the Red Feet, after seeing the tension and the violence, was a risky move. But Lavaca believed it was worth it. He thought he could make a difference, bring peace, but it was a fatal mistake. What Lavaca didn't fully understand was that the Red Feet would go to any lengths to protect their way of life. Early one morning on July 20th, 1987, Bishop Lavaca had a plan. Without telling anyone, not even the scientists nearby, he filled his helicopter with what he thought were friendly gifts: sharp machetes, pots for cooking, and some salt. He flew off towards where the Red Feet lived. Landing near their village, Lavaca started dropping these gifts from the sky. He probably felt like Santa Claus, but again, this was a huge mistake. Down below, a couple of the Red Feet looked up and made gestures. Lavaca thought they were saying hello and come on down, so he made a big decision. He told his pilot to clear out for 2 days. He grabbed Sister Arango, and they both climbed down a rope ladder into the unknown. When the pilot came back 2 days later, guess what he found? What he saw was more horrifying than any horror film. There, in the open, near one of the tribe's huts, were the bodies of Lavaca and Arango. No one knows exactly what happened, but we can only guess from what was found of them. The tribe had a tradition, a really scary one, where they would stick spears through people to pin them to the ground. People who knew a lot about the Red Feet, like some scientists who had been watching them for ages, said Lavaca made some big blunders. First off, flying in with a helicopter, he practically showed up uninvited and Red Feet saw him as danger. Then, there was this big red mark on one of the huts. That was the tribe's way of saying, no one is allowed in their region. But Lavaca missed it. The scariest part was seeing the spears. They were huge, almost as tall as trees, and decorated with leaves. Brother Jesus, who was one of Lavaca's friends, could barely lift one when he showed them to someone later. That's how heavy and serious they were. Even though this story is more than 30 years old, it still haunts everyone. But we don't learn from our mistakes, do we? Because something similar happened not long ago, when another person tried to contact a secluded tribe without their permission. Off the coast of India, hidden in the Bay of Bengal, there is a tiny island. This is North Sentinel Island. It is a special place because it is one of the loneliest spots on Earth. The Indian government has banned everyone from ever visiting it, and they mean it because there are strict rules about it. This island is part of an archipelago of 572 islands called the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. But what's really wild is that out of all these islands, North Sentinel is the only one where no one from our world is allowed to go. Who lives there? A group called the Sentinelese. We are not sure how many there are. Could be 50, could be 200, maybe more, maybe less. They live by hunting and are super good at keeping strangers away. They use bows and arrows and have metal-tipped spears and knives. But here is the thing. There is no metal on their island, so people think they must find the metal washed up on the beach and then use the salvage make their tools. We don't know much about them, not their language, their rules, or even what they call themselves. What we do know is they like to keep to themselves, living in small groups and staying on the move. Their lives might be a lot like their neighbors, the Onge and Jarawa tribes. They probably eat fruits, nuts, and whatever they can hunt, like pigs or birds. They are also pretty good with boats and fishing, sticking close to the calm waters inside their reef. They were supposed to live just like that, on their own, without any interruption, but then someone ruined it. In October 2018, a guy named John Chow decided to visit the Sentinelese. He wanted to go to North Sentinel Island and introduce the Sentinelese to Christianity. He wrote in his journal that he had to go, even calling the island the last place Satan hadn't been beaten. So he went to the Andaman Islands and found some fishermen to take him close to the North Sentinel. They snuck past the Coast Guard in the middle of the night. By morning, John was ready to enter the island. He got into his kayak, wearing just his underwear to seem less scary, and paddled towards the island. As soon as he got close, the Sentinelese were armed with their bows and arrows. They were ready to shoot him. John panicked, threw some fish to them as a peace offering, and paddled back as fast as he could. This was his sign to give up and return home, but he didn't. Later that day, John tried again. This time he made it onto the beach, but the Sentinelese were lying in wait, ready to pounce on him. They took his kayak. John somehow managed to escape from their grip, and he quickly swam back to the fisherman's boat, which was over a mile away. 2 days later, on November 16th, he tried one last time. He went back to the island at sunrise. There was no one at the beach at that time. So once he got to the shore, the fisherman left, and that was the last time anyone saw John Chow. We don't know what happened to him, whether he was captured or not, whether he is alive or not. Most people believe he didn't survive long after setting foot on the island. And then the fishermen saw something. They saw the Sentinelese drag a body on the beach and bury it right there. The fishermen did not recognize the dead person from that far a distance, but we all know who it was. This third horrible run-in with uncontacted tribes happened in 2020, in Rondônia State, Brazil, to be exact. This story involves Riele Franciscado, an advocate for such uncontacted tribes. He worked for a special government group that helps protect these hidden tribes and their homes, specifically around the territory of the Uru-Eu-Wow-Wow people. For months, signs had emerged that this tribe was stepping out of the shadows. The once lush, expansive forest they called home was shrinking because it was being consumed by the relentless advance of ranchers ranchers and loggers. In 2019, the situation escalated with fires both outside and within the reserve. Apparently, the ranchers and loggers wanted to clear land for farming. By 2020, the situation got so bad that the ranchers vowed to burn more territory. This placed unimaginable stress on the indigenous people and their environment. Rieli knew these tribes were under a lot of stress because of all this, so he decided to go talk to them, to let them know he was on their side and wanted to help keep their home safe. He went with a group of police just to be safe as they got closer to where the tribe lived, but things didn't go as planned. The tribe saw them coming and got spooked. They couldn't tell if Rieli and his group were friends or enemies because, to them, most outsiders are trouble. Suddenly, an arrow hit Rieli. It was a total shock for everyone on this side of the world. Rieli pulled the arrow out and tried to run, but he couldn't make it. He fell down after running about 200 feet and didn't get up again. It was over just like that. He died right there, in the forest he was trying to protect. The really sad part is that Rieli was there to help them, not to harm them. He had spent his life fighting for the rights of tribes like the Uru Eo Wow Wow. But in that moment, the tribe didn't know this. They just saw strangers coming into their land and reacted the way they have always done to protect themselves. The people who knew Rieli said his death was a big loss. He was really good at what he did, and he really cared about these tribes and their homes. But his story shows how hard it is to reach out to these uncontacted tribes. They have been left alone for so long and they are really scared of the outside world. It is not easy to show them that someone is there to help. This story shows the huge gap between our world and the world of these hidden tribes. It tells us why it is important to keep trying to protect these tribes and their lands, but from a safe distance. This whole thing ended up being a huge and sad lesson that there are some places and people where it is best to just wave from a distance and respect their space, because sometimes trying to get too close, especially when we don't understand each other, can end very, very badly. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of you. What other disturbing stories of uncontacted tribes have you heard of? Let me know down in the comments. If you have a topic suggestion, please send it to the email in the description. As always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, keep your eyes open and stay curious.